Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to this channel. We appreciate it if you like this video.
Also have a podcast. Check it out in the description.
We're proud to be presented by Tito's Handmade Vodka.
Go make yourself a cocktail right now. We love Tito's and sodas.
Crafted to be savored responsibly. First practice with pads on and a lot of other stuff to rattle through here. Where do you want to start, John? You start.
One thing I jotted down on a funny note was Tim Ryan is fantastic hair. The Niners radio analyst. His hair.
You said it to me, and I looked. I was like, "Oh my God, his hair's long."
You agree? That's a good head of hair.
Great head of hair.
I mean, that's if I could choose. If the big man upstairs would let me pick one attribute, I would choose that for myself. But on a serious note,
I'd go abs. But anyway, keep going.
On a serious note,
Bosa's.
I respect anyone who has major injuries, who have made one. I just respect you if you've made enough money, and you still work through adversity, whatever that may be, to try to do something. And when it has to be a lot of money, and when you play pro sports and you get enormous contracts, you make enough money to never have to do this shit again. And unlike baseball, if you're just a pitcher, or even basketball, if you're just a corner three-point shooter, playing defensive line is hard. Like, you can get fucked up. We were watching Trent Williams go one-on-one, and you'd be like, if it was a golf swing, he's swinging about 50% and still throwing guys to the ground.
Arden Key got pushed to the ground, yeah.
But, like, you have to go up against offensive tackles, which, beside like Shaquille O'Neal, are some of the greatest human specimens on planet Earth, right? They're 6'5", 320. And Dee Ford, who clearly had major back issues, right? And he's a speed guy. I thought it was over. He's out there practicing pretty hard. And I heard a couple times the defensive line coach like, "D, you're good." Like they're limiting his reps, but he was there right next to the coach, attentive. Now I get they're paying him money and he's a professional, but I've just been around this thing long enough to know, like, once guys hit that mark 30, 31, 32, and they've made a huge amount of money and they get a major injury that derails their career, it's understandable to be like, this is over. And he's just grinded. Like I was not expecting it. I thought he looked good. He looked, the Dee Ford that I knew at Kansas City and even that first year with the Niners, just knowing the guys in Kansas City, was like 230, 235. I thought he looked a little thicker than that. I'd probably say he looks like 245.
Well, I asked you, I'm like, is this what he normally looks like?
Yeah, he looks thicker. Now, he's been working out. He's had year and a half to work out, but still.
Yeah, I mean, how many games are we talking about here the last 3 years?
Well, I don't think he played a snap last year.
It says he appeared in a game.
Maybe he did make a comeback, and then immediately after the first series came out, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 11 games in 19. Played all 16 and 18 for Kansas City. Only played 6 the year before that. So, in the last 4 years, you're talking about 1 full season, and the last 2 years, you're talking about 12 total games.
Remember, they franchised him in Kansas City and traded him for, like, the Niners not only gave him a second-round pick, they then gave him a lot of money. Sometimes you miss, but I do think you appreciate as a team if the guy just keeps trying, right? And the back injury,
especially when you think like he's like a useful middle reliever, a left-handed matchup guy, right? Like there's a place for him.
I can imagine, right? If I break my arm or I fuck up my shoulder or I, Carson Wentz my foot, everyone knows. Like the team knows I'm not like, hey guys, I have a displaced foot, right? I think sometimes with a back injury, it's kind of like a headache. Like I got a headache. You're like, well, I don't know how much it hurts. You're like, it hurts, right? It's like my back. I remember Steve Kerr talking about don't ever get back because no one really knows except you. All these other injuries, like you tear your tricep, it's like the doctor's like, that looks bad. You're like, we can't even really tell, but, just relax. It's just one of those things where I can imagine it's a lonely, as someone who's never, ever hurt his back and knows some people, I think it is probably the loneliest injury. Because if you have a broken leg and you're walking around with a cast, everyone's like, how you feeling, man?
Yeah.
Right? Or something on your arm, splint on your wrist. My mom broke her wrist. Like, everyone can tell. Your back, you're like, are you good? Man, what's your problem?
Yeah. Plus limping, when you're walking and limping, it's like, is that real? Is that a real limp? Or no, I'm with you. We have used the early, like those primo Harbaugh years as a barometer for good practices and good-looking teams. Going out to a primo Super Bowl contender Harbaugh year practice, like for 2-3 years, it was, you thought you were watching the best of the best. Like what's going to an Alabama practice right now probably feels like. It was not loud, but there were badasses everywhere.
Lot quieter.
There were badasses everywhere, right? And you said to me today,
lot less going on at those, right? The fans weren't out there.
Yeah, but it was more just about the presence.
Yeah.
They had so many players with a presence.
Yeah, it felt like football.
Both physically and just, Alden and Navarro and Patrick Willis were not 6'8" like DeForest Buckner, right?
Yeah.
6'7" like Eric Armstead. But they just had a presence about them. And you said today to me, you're like, I kind of feel that again. And, I think you kind of felt it. Buckner really fit that mold. But I think when you looked around, I think a quarterback maybe brings a little of that. The guy to me who you looked at today and went, and we've seen him in person many times before, but to just look at Fred Warner, and he just looks different than most NFL linebackers, I think you kind of understand why he's such an elite cover guy when you see him in person, because he's really tall. And it's really apparent when you get to, get near him. It doesn't come across on television how because I turned to you and said, I think Fred looks taller than 6'3". But it's, you look out and you go, there's there's one of the best linebackers in the league. There's one of the best left tackles in the league. And there's one of the best tight ends in the league. But to me, it's specifically Fred in a game of physical people really stands out for looking different than most guys that play his position.
Yeah, he really looks like a star. I mean, he looks like a star. I mean, they have some star qualities to him, right? I mean, Bosa, Kittle, Warner. I mean, you're talking three of the best of their position. Obviously, Bosa looks healthy. That to me is a key for a guy that had a pretty devastating knee injury. Obviously, they're not putting him out there every single snap, a little like Dee Ford, as they should not, right? I mean, you're not getting him hurt at practice. Like, Armstead can play every snap, and he's unfazed. But Bosa, when you have a 15-sack guy coming off the edge, potential, like that does put you in the realm to be a big-time defense, right? I'll go back to the Raiders team that made the playoffs that had Khalil Mack when he won the Defensive Player of the Year at two different positions. Their defense sucked, right? It was not very good. But he was so good. When you rush the passer a lot, you just get a lot of tip balls, create some turnovers just because of the pass rush. And the Niners, unlike that team that just had Khalil Mack, they have two or three guys that should be able to pressure the quarterback. And Kinlaw, we stood next to him a couple times, mammoth of a human being. Absolute. And we've talked about this, I think, on the last podcast or two ago. Armstead and Buckner are two of the most unique players I've ever seen in the NFL. And I just think they're two outliers in the NFL, right? To be that tall, that long, that athletic. They play inside. They're not true pass rush. Like, they're comfortable lining up over. Obviously, Buckner is. Armstead can kind of do both, but Armstead has no problem putting him inside. They just look different than every other massive defensive lineman they stand around. Kinlaw, more of a normal defensive tackle, but he's still 2 inches probably taller than 6'4", so he's 6'6". Whatever they list him at, they're probably lowballing him. If I had to guess, just looking at him, 335.
Got him at 319. 6'5", 319 on the official.
This 319 seems small, right? Would you add about 15 to that? And it's not. I don't think he looks fat.
He looks good.
Looks an enormous defensive tackle. You should feel pretty good. You have enough pass rushers around him. When you throw him in, like, you ain't running at me. To me, that's one of his roles. Like, just when the team wants to run, they are going to try to double team him. He should just hold them up and fuck up their run game. Because any pass rush you get out of him, like if you can get 5-6 sacks, that'd be incredible. He should be a terror in the run game. He should immediately be, at that size and that talent, one of the best run front players in the league. Because I saw Buckner, who was that. He didn't have that stoutness. Buckner really just kind of, I think most people around Buckner would tell you, despite his top 10 pick and how talented he is, he still overachieves. If Kinlaw just achieves, who's blocking that guy? Besides, like, Trent Williams.
Who's moving him?
Trent Williams.
Right? You don't just have to block him. In the run game, you got to move him.
He's not a movable object. He's fucking huge.
Other observations. One thing we got to stand close to DeMeco Ryans a little bit today. Quick interruption to tell you to click on DraftKings in the description and use the promo code HAM.
And if you want some meat, butcherbox.com/ham down below. Free lobster tails and ribeyes.
He was more vocal than I expected him to be at times, just in terms of cheering guys on, At one point, he was yelling at Fred Warner. He saw, I think what he saw was like a pick. He wanted Fred to move to where he knew the ball was going before Fred. Now, in Fred's defense, DeMeco's standing like, DeMeco's not in the middle of the field, but he's been there. He knows what it looks like. He's got the walkie-talkie. But yeah, I enjoyed watching. I watched him for a while. At first, I'm like, he's quiet. But then as stuff started to get going, 11 on 11, he was yelling at guys. He looked very comfortable. He looked very comfortable doing what he was doing. He's got
also hard to hear a coach when Post Malone's at 700 decibels behind you. So
yeah, but I heard you could tell he was yelling at guys. And
yeah, I think overall in training camp, if you just went team by team, it's a very optimistic time. Now, I bet if you went Jags, Texans, the Jets, like
I bet Jets are sneaky more optimistic than you.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of like just trying to improve young guys. You wouldn't know half the guys that they're kind of coaching up. When you go to Seattle, the Rams, the Packers, Tampa, right? This is the good teams, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. I do think you walk out there with the Niners, there was like just the way that everyone cared. Like you just had to go body language on guys. Like we're fucking pretty good.
Yeah.
You just kind of get that. And then back to what you said about the Harbaugh teams, those guys carried themselves like they had big swinging dicks because they did. They would knock you out. And they did it for years. And once Jim got there, Jim brought that positive energy and he led them, that talent, and it all came together. This group, I think, knows, and a lot of the guys, obviously last year, everything got derailed. I think they know they're pretty good. The defensive guys, I think, know they're really good because I think last year, if you're Fred Warner, right, or you're Armstead, Bosa goes, I was here 1 year and I was kicking everyone's ass for a season. Who's beating us on defense? Offensively, they're just, depending on who the quarterback is, they're just natural growing pains. But I think defensively, the intensity of this unit, and just given that part of a defense is how you build it, right? Like you can, depending on who your DBs are, if you get hard-hitting DBs, which the Niners have had, I know they lost Sherman, but Verrett will hit you. Mosley will definitely hit you. Jimmy Ward wants to hit you. A couple times he blitzed, and you could tell, I'm not allowed to hit Jimmy, so he pulls up. When your DBs hit, naturally your front seven is typically going to hit. That's the one unit that hits, right? They're going to be one of the more physical defenses in the league. K'Wan Williams is a hitter.
And they're going to be one of the more physical run games in the league. No shocker.
Now, can they just man-to-man cover on the outside?
So, that was one of the things we wanted to go watch was Ambry Thomas and Diamador Lenore, the two rookies. I'm concerned about that. I was concerned about it before the draft. I didn't watch individual cornerback work today. Normally, John, that's the first place I go. I let other experts tell me about hip turns. But, I'll tell you what I saw. Diamador Lenore a couple of times. He got a penalty press coverage on River Craycraft coming off the line of scrimmage. He probably should have got a penalty. Ayuk had an in-breaking route, and Lenore was kind of holding him, playing physical with him. I gave Ayuk Ayuk kind of gave him an arm, knocked him back, and then was able to get free over the middle.
You do that shit in May. That's a draft pick.
Thomas a couple of times in press coverage, kind of Kevin White was able to break through it and break by him. So, there wasn't a lot of opportunity. I thought I was kind of looking forward to seeing those guys. Would you see them against Ayuk or see them against Debo? Obviously, we didn't get Debo, but that's still very much a question. I think one thing you notice, Lenore is a little thicker. He's not. I think maybe he's listed at 5'10", and Thomas is listed at 6 foot. Thomas, kind of from the waist down, looks a little bit like Akello Witherspoon. He's not as tall, but he's got, he's got a skinnier kind of fast guy legs. He's got tall guy legs. I don't know what his if he's high hipped, or I don't know what the ratio is, hip to torso, but he does have long legs.
Long legged.
Yeah, he's got long legs. But Lenore is just kind of stout.
Oh, high cut.
High cut. Yeah, thank you.
High cut.
But I don't know. I didn't walk away today feeling like I had any questions answered there.
Now, they aren't the starters, right? But we just know the way the league works, how between Verrett and Mosley, like more than likely one of those guys is going to get banged up. You're going to need other guys to play. Now, the thing with corners, like guys can kind of come out of nowhere. Emmanuel Mosley was an undrafted free agent, and now he's a starter. And, like, the Niners feel good about it. But ideally, you would like – now, their draft class, if those two guys, one of those two guys is good, Trey Lance is going to be the starter sooner or later. Aaron Banks, probably more than likely, starts at guard. Trey Sermon is going to get – whether you start or not in this offense, I would be shocked if he's not getting double-digit carries. He had one run. I was like, God, I thought he was like a Jerome Bettis. He looked fast.
He did look fast.
Elijah Mitchell had a run. Like, he's clearly going to play. So if that just draft class alone, now that's all on offense. But that would be 2 running backs, a running quarterback who can also throw, and a big guard. You'd feel pretty good about that. Now, ideally, you're just going to need some DB help. Like, that's just been a problem. It does feel the Niners have had a lot of DB injuries over their injury tenure. So
it's not an area of depth.
I've always said this, though, when people nitpick just defensive backfields, the best teams, when they had Revis or Richard Sherman in Seattle and the Jets, their other corner usually sucked. One year, the Jets had Cromartie. But remember the Seattle teams, it was like Brandon Brown or it was like other guys. They just rotate through. You usually don't have like, we got Richard Sherman and Patrick Peterson are our 2 corners. That's not – so most teams, if you have one good cornerback, we have Darius Slay. That's it, and their other corner stinks. A lot of teams just have like kind of 2 random guys there. So that's where the Niners have done this. I think a lot of good teams do this. The Steelers are a good example. Just draft defensive linemen every year. just try to win up front, and then you make those guys look way better and have like solid safety play. And I think the Niners do have good safeties. My take is I do think corner is a position where I would invest less in, and I would invest more in middle linebacker, and then obviously the Niners have one because I think so many teams want to throw the tight end and the running back, and that's where Fred's going to make his money, right? Like if you're playing Devontae Adams or a star receiver, like he's just kind of going to get his. But if you can take away everything else, you can double team that guy. Now, more and more teams are just going to have several wide receivers, and think about the division they play in, right? I mean, you got Lockett and you have DK, you have Robert Woods, and you have Kupp.
And they drafted a fast guy, You
got Hopkins, and you got Christian Kirk's a good player.
Yeah.
But they
just drafted Rondale Moore. They've been trying to find the second guy for a while.
Yeah. I mean, they paid AJ. We'll see what they got there.
Yeah, Andy.
But I would say Lockett and DK are a legit problem, right?
Yeah, and they'd be a problem if you had a shutdown corner. You'd still have a problem.
Yeah.
I think the question with Lenore and to me and Thomas, it's not did you find a lockdown corner. It's just did you find guys that you can trust if you need to trust them.
Yeah.
Or did you find one guy, not both? I mean, you draft 2 so you can hit one is kind of the hope, right?
Yeah. Which one's the Oregon kid?
Diamador Lenore.
Okay. And Thomas is from Michigan.
One of my favorite names.
I do think Akello said that when he went to Seattle, he said, when I've been healthy, I've been the best corner in the league, or one of them.
Yeah, there was a quote, something along those lines. I mean, now he's going up against DK. I mean, if he has good practices, and lock it.
I think people would be surprised. I do think a lot of corners talk like that. Like, if you just walk, we're usually the way we have to watch practice it for the Niners. We're always on the defensive side of the ball. You get some pretty arrogant and cocky things said by guys you've never heard of. You're like, what did I just say? They have a lot of self-belief on that.
Absolutely.
Side. Yeah. And it's not the defensive linemen don't even talk. Like, I didn't hear Eric Armstead say or Fred say one thing. We're standing right next to him. It's the smaller, skinnier guys down there. They never shut up.
Kinlaw did get into it and kept going with somebody. But I think that's a lot of these guys. If you saw any of Nick Foles, I watched 10 minutes of Nick Foles' press conference the other day, in which he basically raised the Colts, come and get me. But he said repeatedly, I know what kind of player I am. It just, he's the third string quarterback of the Bears, and that's how he thinks of himself. And I have no issue with players that I think you have to have that self-belief. So,
he did win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to argue.
No, I know, but he's been pretty terrible.
Ayuk did catch some punts. Yeah, anything else you had from observations?
No, I mean, I give it. I like that Kyle his time. I like that 10 spot.
10-17.
It's not too early. It's not too late.
Crowd was good.
Better than noon. Better than 8. I just like that time.
Would have
Crowd
liked to
was
have
good.
seen Debo.
Would have liked to seen Debo, but I think it's part of the package. I'm not trying to get ahead of ourselves here, but if Debo just has another one of those years where he just battles these tissue injuries, like that is an area where the Niners are just gonna like that address to try to get. Now it's hard because Ayuk's a first-round pick, Kittle's being paid a lot. You got several running backs.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can just patchwork it together consistently.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're very dependent on Ayuk.
You don't really have the depth at receiver to. I mean, I guess you have to include Kittle, and you got some running backs that can catch, and Juszczyk can catch. So you can spread, but I mean, obviously you include Kittle. He's going to be a leading receiver. But
you trade. I guess you don't have any picks to trade for a star, because you have money, right? Once you get rid of Jimmy, they're going to have a 2-year span. Year 2, 3, and potentially 4. I'm not into paying the guy after year 3. I wait till year 4, so you get those 3 years of that rookie contract. You get to kind of load.
Yeah.
Up.
You capitalize on Trey Lance's relative.
Yeah,
cheapness, is that what you're saying?
Say what you want about the Browns, they've done that with Baker Mayfield, right? They've been very aggressive for 3 straight years, like signing guys, trading for guys, doing things. You see the Clowney video that went viral of him tripping over the bag?
No.
Someone just type in Clowney. It was like, God, Clowney looks good. And it's the drill where there's like 5 straight dummies, and you hit one with your right, you hit one with your left. Well, one goes down, and then he trips over it.
Oh,
it's
Clowney looks scary good. That tells the tweet.
Hit the ground pretty hard.
Those drills you watch, and you and I were talking about this today. It's incredible the degree to which football practice is, for all we talk about scheme and so much time is spent on fundamentals, and all this stuff looks kind of easy until you see somebody trip over a bag, and then you realize maybe most people couldn't go through a ladder drill this quickly, or do the thing where they bring the overhang that's low, so you have to crouch, keep low, stay low, and shuffle underneath. It doesn't look like it's that hard until like somebody that's not an elite football player does it.
You and I were bullshitting about this in practice. Is that, and it hit me just watching the amount of people out there. One, you are so dependent on your assistant coaches, right, to just run those basic drills. And by the time you get to the pros, the drills, the first thing the middle linebackers did was 2 guys stand 5 yards apart. You take a couple steps and you just do a form tackle. Like Fred Warner's been doing that since he was young. But think about basketball, right? Steve Kerr did this when he first got hired from the Warriors, but most people don't run on bounce passes. I remember Iguodala's quotes were we're doing bounce passes. We're like, what is this guy doing? And it ended up working out for him. But in the NBA, it's just give me the fucking ball. I make $40 million. In baseball, the GMs are running it. In football, it's a double whammy, right? One, you do have to be pretty scheme versed as a coach. You either run a side of the ball, you influence the entire team. You have to handle a lot of football knowledge, X's and O's. And then you have fucking 10 million people running around in August practice. From your players, you got 90 of them. You got 20 plus coaches. You have equipment people. You got trainers. Every single question, if you truly want the decision maker, comes to that guy. Now, I do think you just kind of know, leave this guy alone till after practice, maybe go to a court. But there is a lot going on in their practice. It's understandable why football coaches, there's just a small amount of good ones, because you could probably know football, but you could get overwhelmed with everything else, right?
Because there's also, there were times when we saw them working Diamador Lenore in, they'd work Ambry Thomas in, sometimes they'd send them in together to be on opposite sides. Part of that equation might be, who are they going against? Do we want a couple of reps of Diamador Lenore against Brandon Ayuk? Right? It's not just the DB coach who gets to send them in wherever he wants. Sometimes there's a larger practice plan about who are they repping against and how do we get them particular reps. So there's just a lot of moving parts that you're trying to organize at once.
Well, and that's usually, in my experience, done well before.
Right.
But a lot of it, like if you're Kyle, you might not have a team meeting with your coaches with the defensive side. You just tell, hey, DeMeco, or the linebacker coach, you tell DeMeco, this is what I want. And you hear a lot of coaches that fail go, if I could do it over again, I shouldn't have micromanaged so much. I should have trusted my people. You do just have to trust your people to figure it out, right? You say something, your mind's working a mile a minute. you just kind of like, I hope this guy knows what I meant. The communication is so big. Like, it is very, very difficult to be a football coach. And obviously, I'm not even just talking the NFL. College, a big high school, like there's way more moving
when you
parts
have
than the
less
other
staff
sports.
at the high school level, right?
Yeah, there's a lot
There's
of
like
people
8
running
coaches
around.
and 7 of them are volunteers. Some places it's a lot.
I mean, if you don't win at Clovis West, people be on your ass.
Come on, EB, go get him, big boy. Go get him. Somebody asked about the Jalen Hurd. He was out there today. You remember so much when he came out was like you can use him as a running back, you can do all this stuff. Now you look at this team and they've got a ton of running backs. The question I have is can he be a receiver for you? Not is he a Swiss Army knife necessarily, even though I think he basically came into the league at Fred Warner's height and weight. So actually a little taller, probably. It was pretty crazy. He was like, I understand why there's so much question about him because physically he's an outlier.
Well, he's competing now to make the team. Like now, his career's kind of on the line with the Niners. Do you agree there?
Yeah.
Like you're not a running back. You're an outside wide receiver. Can you make the team? Of all the intriguing guys, to me, he's someone to keep an eye on the preseason. Like he needs to have some moments for the Niners to make the team. And who knows? Maybe there's a number game. They can't keep him. Could he do enough to intrigue another team? Like if you're some shitty team, like the Texans or the Jets. I've done this job. I have a buddy that's coming out to the Raider-Niner game, and he's like, 2 weeks, like, I'll meet you in the city. We'll get dinner. I was like, you got to drive, an hour down there. He didn't care. You and I talked about it. Some people just want to come. But my point is he's coming to watch players like that. Like he's just a guy that I'm sure a lot of teams had intriguing draft grades on. I was talking to David Lombardi out there, he's like, he's kind of been the man of mystery the last 2 years, right?
That's a good way to put
hurt.
it. Yeah.
He had that first preseason game. He scored a touchdown or scored 2 touchdowns. Definitely ran the guy over at the goal line. And then we just haven't seen him. And you see him out there. He's big, but it's like Ayuk's here. Sanu looks good. All their running backs look sweet. It's like, they even have a spot for him?
They don't need trick play running backs. They just got they got talented running backs. They got Juszczyk.
Well, you know what's going to be Jalen's problem? He's not going to cover kicks. So he's not going to play special teams. He's not a special team. He has to be a legit receiver. Can he be a guy that I'm playing 20 snaps a game at wide receiver? And I would say it's going to be difficult. He's fighting an uphill battle now.
Yeah.